Good morning, welcome to my next video. I'm looking at Australian volutes and I'm looking at Volutoconus, Symbiola and Amoria. So that's in my area, Darwin, Northern Territory. That's an iconic shell, Volutoconus bednali. Collected by trawlers, washed up on beaches after storms. Usually the very dark markings indicate live collected, whereas the light ones indicate beach collected, usually. That large one there, 158 millimeters, was the world record at one stage, but not anymore. Down here we've got the group of the Grosseyes, the Hargreaves eye, the Coniformis, and some forms, various forms of those. So the Grosseye were once all known as Grosseye, but now there's a number of different species, like Multiformis, that smaller one down there. Interestingly, that particular one is the very southern range of Grosseye. And these two are the very northern range, Torres Strait Island for that one, and that one collected ARVUSC of the Northern Territory. And definitely has been given a distinct name. You just have to look at the protoconch to see how different it is to your typical Grosseye shells. Here we've got a well-known form, McMichaeli, Townsville region. Then we've got the Hargreaves eye from Western Australia. Interesting, three quite variable forms there. I'm surprised the splitters haven't come along and named each of those a different species. Then we've got Daisy eye there, Coniformis along there, also a WA shell. And interestingly, most collectors find Coniformis not by looking at shells washed up on a beach, but actually going to bird nesting sites where various birds will take these shells from the seabed, they'll ingest the animal and they'll discard the shell near their nesting sites. Now we'll go and have a look at the Symbiola. Perhaps the most well-known complex here is pulchra. Lots of varieties there, with shells like Perplicator, Intruderi, and Thatcheri. Down here, that largest Thatcheri is 98 millimeters, the largest Intruderi is 92 millimeters, and the largest of the pulchras I have is over here, about 97 millimeters, and there's about 3 or 4 shells there that are over 90 millimeters. Some interesting forms, perhaps the rarest is this one here, which is Excelsa. Absolutely beautiful shell that. Here's an interesting form, lacking any of the dark type of markings. Would be typical of the typical pulchra, but it's lacking any dark marks. Here's another very well-known Cucamorum. Nice large one there, another lovely one there. So lots of interesting forms. So I could talk about that group for ages. Crescenta there, Stricta there, a couple of larger ones there, Fraseri, Wisemanni, Randalli. Huge variety. Beautiful shells. Next group, also in the Symbiola group. Some nice local shells here, the Sophia. Some lovely and interesting, fairly consistent with the dots and the stripings, but sometimes even more defined markings, and sometimes quite a different shape. Much flatter at the top there, and sometimes you get a beautiful colour form like that one there. Just a pink rather than a brown background. Symbiola, also off Northern Territory waters from trawlers. Never found that one myself because they're quite deep water, whereas Sophia, I have found most of those myself. The Rotilla is not a local shell, and there's a couple there from Papua New Guinea, but I've just kept them together as a group to look at the different forms of Rotilla. There's a couple of nice ones here from northern Queensland, just north of Cooktown. And then lots of other ones, Narcissi, Obolita, Nervosa, nice colour forms, Irvini there, lovely shell there. All right, so, and now a couple of other Symbiolas. There we have Flavigans, which is a local shell. They've all been collected in from the Northern Territory. So you've got with nodules, smooth, various patterns, down to being albino. So nice variety of Flavicans there. For years, I couldn't find them in the Darwin area, and suddenly they started appearing about 10, 15 years ago. And I had met a collector about 40 years ago who had literally collected thousands of these shells, and I suspect he collected out almost the entire population, and it took years for the population to recover before shells were available again. So just goes to show what selfish collecting can do environmentally. And here's a very interesting one. I decided to get out the label here. Has a bit of a story. This is Vespertillo, very well known in Indonesia and parts of Asia, but not known from Australia. And this particular one was collected just north of Bathurst Island, just off the shore of Bathurst Island, February 2018. And the story that I was told was that scampi boats were sorting nets in shallow water. They had a trawl fishing run before going out to deeper water, and lo and behold, what came up in the nets? That specimen. So to my knowledge, a very rare shell in Australian waters, and that one is 93 millimeters, and just the fact that it has so few markings is also very interesting. Just another Symbiola to look at, the well-known Magnifica. There's your very typical form. They get much larger. I'm just looking at the ones in drawers for this video, and here is some varieties. The nodulus form, which is quite typical with the very large shells. One with nice brown staining there, and then some interesting Alta Spira, I think that's the variety that's called. Now for the Amorias, and there we have the raw Damoni, a number of subspecies there. The splitters haven't yet come along and given them distinct species names to my knowledge, but anything is possible over the next few years. There's some of the better local shells of Darwin. There's a lovely albino one. It is not grey eye, it's an albino. Damoni, I collected that in Darwin Harbour. So lots of interesting forms, cross WA forms there. And then a real mixture of forms down here, ranging from Queensland through to Indonesia. Some of the details, I think, and to Western Australia, you can read on some of those labels. All right, certainly a group that I very much love collecting. And talking of grey eye before, here we have some grey eyes. Whitworth eye with the markings there. Some of them have got distinct bands, although in this light, I think, in this light it's not that easy to see. In good light you can clearly see the brown bands across some of those shells. That very white specimen there, lovely. And then of course the variety that lots of people go wild about is this one here. So a nice large one there, which is well in excess of 12 centimetres. I should actually get out the tape measure for that. Yes, it's about 12.5. There's some other ones. It's probably my best specimen in terms of being gem. That's one I acquired back in the 70s from Taiwanese trawlers. So anyone suggesting that the Taiwanese trawlers never came into Australian waters, well, there's lots of evidence to indicate they definitely did. Here's some other Amoria elliotti, Jamacrae, undulata, zebra, lineatiana, some other ones there, some Macandrew eye, particularly large one there. I suspect that's world record size, if not very close to it anyway. And a couple of little ring-ins here. Lazaroni, never found live to my knowledge, off the New South Wales coast, and very hard to come by those specimens. And I'll quickly go on, I'm looking at the time. Maculata, a lot of colour forms there, from white to white with a few markings, with many markings through to orange. And then we've got here Praetexta, Newmani, and then Turneri for just about everything else there, although they've started naming a few species within this group. So I believe that one there, although I can't really see why it is a new species, but I've been told it is. And then another one, if there is to be a new species, I think that's one that's a good candidate. Okay, and the final draw, I'm just aware at the time, a mixture of Amoria and Symbiola. The hunter eyes, which are nice variety there, in patterns, fairly typical patterns, down to some interesting ones, down to no pattern, down to that pattern without the stripes, and then there we have another well-known species, was also known as hunter eye, but it's got another name today. And then some other well-known ones there. I've just about run out of time, so I better finish. The only one I'll point out there is Rinkensai. Not good specimens by any means, but that would have been a lovely one if it was intact. But nice to have specimens anyway, even if they're not perfect. Right, thank you.